Hello, I'm sure all is well. Welcome to the BTS breakdown for my LinkedIn photo and video that I posted a few days ago. In this episode, I'll take you through the setup, my thinking, learnings, and touch on things that I want to improve on. Right, let's get into it. Let's start with the photo shoot and get into the camera settings. I use the Sony A73. It's a super camera and works for both photos and videos. The lens of choice for this shoot was the 85mm. It's a great focal length for portraits and didn't distort any of my facial features. I set the ISO at 800. It's a little on the higher side, but it helped just to bring up the exposure on set. In terms of the aperture, I used f5.6 to ensure everything from the nose to the back of the ears was in focus. Because I was standing for this shoot and would occasionally sway back and forth, the shutter speed of 1 over 125 helped to eliminate any blur from my movement. I set the white balance in camera to 4200 Kelvin, and this was because I had 5600 Kelvin on one side and 2500 Kelvin on the other. Setting the temperature in between these values helped give me a good balance between the cool and the warm tones. The next thing I want to talk about is tethering. Because I was a one-man band for this shoot, the ability to tether from the camera to the laptop allowed me to control all the settings from about half a meter away. This made things super easy for me. Let's move on to color theory. This image and the video was shot for my LinkedIn profile. So I wanted to go with a blue and gray color palette to help bring out a corporate feel. When I looked at the color wheel, I had already set blue as a key color. And looking across the blues, you find yellows, oranges, and reds, which are the complementary colors. With this in mind, I used tones of blue for the set and wardrobe and incorporated the oranges and yellows through the warm lighting. My favorite part of any shoot is the process of lighting. For the background, I set up a checkerboard effect, which means you have pockets of light, dark, and light. This helps with creating depth and makes the scene a lot more interesting. This was achieved through a single light which was passed through a styrofoam gobo. I simply cut out the shapes and blocked parts of it to get the effect I wanted. To bring some mood into the visual, I've used the Rembrandt lighting style. I also used a double layer of diffusion to soften the effect and to have a nice roll off between the lighter and shadow areas. To separate the image from the background, I've used a couple of hard light sources. The first is from the side, the second is at the top, and the third is also at the top, but it's angled slightly to create this warm edge light. To put the finishing touches on the lighting, I used a golden reflector and a white styrofoam board to bounce back some light into the darker areas. This helped to lighten all the shadow areas in the image. Right. Something we overlook is makeup. Disclaimer, I am not an expert in this area, but it was important to mention. I used a tinted moisturizer to help get a consistent color across my face. And on top of this, I used a matte fixer which helped to take the shine off my nose and forehead area. Watch this space. There is a lot more learning to be done here. That was the photography side of things, but I also want to focus on a second component, which is the storytelling side. Something I'm looking at doing is seeing how I can take the same setup and with a few tweaks make it work for video also. Let's get into it. To make the video more interesting, I added two cameras to the set. The first was the 35mm, which gave me a nice expanded view of the set. For the angle, I went lower than eye level and slightly elevated so that I would look a little more authoritative. The second camera, which was the 16mm, exposed the full set. I wanted to give the viewer a feeling of literally being on set and listening in. Plus, I personally love the behind the scene look. In terms of the changes made on set, I simply moved the golden reflector out of view and removed the big white bounce board which was in front of me for the photo shoot. One thing that saved me many times was the position markers. Apart from bumping into things, I was also moving stuff in and out of set. These really helped me put stuff back in place quite quickly. There are many things I'm still learning and getting better at, from using false color, exposing for S-Log, applying lighting ratios to the scene, and experimenting on how far 8-bit footage can be pushed and pulled in the grading process. Last but not least, something I spent a lot of time on was scripting what I wanted to say and practicing to speak a lot slower. Luckily, I had an iPad which was placed above the main camera. I'm so glad I didn't have to memorize anything. We all know that good audio is critical for any video. So to avoid the noises that you hear during the day, I shot this from about 7 p.m. in the evening. The audio was captured through a boom mic and the Zoom H4n Pro. Looking back at this shoot, one of my biggest learnings was on the choice of lenses and the effect it had on the image and story. I initially used a 50mm for the close-up and it distorted my face. I remember sending the demo to a friend of mine and he quickly called back and said, "Sandeep, how much weight have you put on? You don't look like this. It must be the lens." I'm quickly realizing that there are so many aspects of this craft to consider and to learn about. I'm loving it. Let's keep pushing. See you at the next one.